Welcome to the Super Region 2 Round 2 Playoff Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Poe, joined this week again by Kay Ferg and Chris. Man, we had a great week one of playoff action. We got some even more exciting matchups going here into week two. I'm really excited. What are your thoughts here as we kind of look and we're going to break down week two?
Things are tightening up, guys. I mean, week one was a lot of high-scoring, high-flying action. We kind of see a lot of separation in week one. So, week two is going to be really interesting. A lot of action going on between these four teams.
There really is, and we see right here on the bracket, Chris. Let's take a look at that top game right there. Number one seed Benedict is hosting Lenoir-Rhyne. Benedict had the bye last week. Lenoir-Rhyne had that pretty convincing win against Shepherd, and this game is intriguing to me, particularly for I think a lot of reasons. Had the opportunity to see Benedict play last year, and really they're an explosive team on offense and defense. They fly around on defense. They make plays. Offensively, they get in sync. And we've seen them play. If you watch them at all on TV this year, you got to see just how much that program is built up. And I think they're, in my opinion, on a lot better footing than they were last year because they've had the opportunity to grow. They've been in this game before. They've been in this situation before. So that bye week really kind of hits at that right time. You can't really put an emphasis on, to me, that week one bye week for Benedict. And I think they're going to be primed and ready to go, get a little rest, get your legs back under you at this point in the season. And they've been there before. And I think that's a big piece to this.
Yeah, when you look at Benedict, you have to wonder, are they going to be able to make a difference this year? Last year was the first time they ever been to the playoffs. And so they kind of got knocked out of a dreamy scenario with a fellow South Atlantic opponent in Wingate last year. Now they play another, Lenoir-Rhyne coming to town. And the South Atlantic Conference seems to have a hex or something like that on the HBCU schools in general. So, it's a pretty big matchup to see Lenoir-Rhyne coming to town. Not just a high-flying offense, but also a very, very good defense as well.
For sure. And you look at that Lenoir-Rhyne team, you watch, if you tuned into that game last week or even looked at the stat line, I mean, it was an absolute show on offense for the Bears. I felt like Sean White making the most of the opportunity and company, really, because it's not just Sean White. It's that whole offensive line, the receivers, the running backs, and then that defense is nasty. They made some great adjustments at the half, I felt like, shut Shepherd out in the second half. And anybody who's followed D2 football knows kind of the run that Shepherd's been on. And to make that statement against a team like that, and it doesn't matter if it's Tyson Bagent and whoever's under center, that program has sustained, right, Chris? And then make that statement in that game, that said something to me for Lenoir-Rhyne.
Yeah, Shepherd laid an egg on this one. I mean, there's no way around that one. They've been kind of hot and cold quite a bit of the season, and they got put into the pressure cooker at Lenoir-Rhyne, and it just didn't work out very well for them. And it just really didn't matter what Shepherd tried. I mean, it just felt like they were just so overmatched in this game. So, Lenoir-Rhyne just one of the strengths of Lenoir-Rhyne is they just have so many weapons on both sides of the ball. And because of that, that's very hard to defend again when you just think about folks like Dwayne McGee, running back. You think about the plethora of wide receivers that they have, the career day that Sean White had. I mean, that just tells you just how potent they are on offense and how difficult they can be to stop.
They are. And, we've talked a lot about the offense, right? Because they put the points up. But how about that defensive front, Chris? I mean, they just get after you up front. They're relentless and they wear you down by the third, fourth quarter. They're after you. I think the linebackers are really athletic. They move well in space. You got John Ross May leading that group right there. And then the secondary, the safeties are so fast. They're able to come down and rob the holes. And they do a lot on the defensive side of the football. And one of the things that stuck out to me, Chris, that and you'll understand this, I know. But when you look at a team like Shepherd, right, and you think of over the aggregate, they've been in the playoffs at least the last 4 years. They've at least made it one, if not two rounds in the playoffs. And so that's another 8 games. That's another 8 weeks that those seniors had of preparation and practice and playing and all of that, regardless of where it looks like, come the end of the season. But, and then they've made some deep runs in the regional finals. So for me, when you look at a team like that, and Lenoir-Rhyne had that success, and any of these teams that are consistently in the playoffs, right, it adds up when you add a freshman to a senior and the number of extra weeks they get to practice, it almost can boil down to a whole season. And I think for Lenoir-Rhyne to do that against that competition is huge. And on the flip side of that, for Benedict, Kris, they've been in this situation for the last 2 years. So that's 2 weeks extra of practice each year that they've got. And you talk about building your program, I think is really important. It's really critical. It's one of the things that you use as a foundation because it shortens that gap between your last game and spring ball, right? But Kris, what are some thoughts on, if Benedict is going to be successful on Saturday, what are some things that you think that they have to do that's going to be that necessity?
Well, when you look at these two teams, the one thing that stands out is that they're nearly identical. They have, in the stat lines in particular, they both average over 40 points a game, and they give up very little in scoring. Actually, Benedict's a little bit better with 8 points a game given up. And one of the things I think that Benedict's going to have to do is use that fearsome defensive line. When you talk about Lubert, Danellis, Jaden Broughton, those guys are really going to have to disrupt what Lenoir-Rhyne's doing. I think it's just going to have to start there because, getting into a shootout, I'm not sure that bodes very well for Benedict here. But slowing them down, maybe getting them into the 20s, keeping them into the 20s, I think gives them a chance. But yeah, getting into a shootout, I'm not so sure that's going to be good for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for Benedict, I think they're going to have to use some of that athleticism on defense there and confuse Sean White and make him make some mistakes, throw some interceptions, use some of that speed that they have, particularly in the second level, third level, to force some errors by the offense. And then I think offensively, Benedict, I think for them, they have to use, again, that speed that they have, get them running sideline to sideline, get that defensive front tired and get the whole defense tired, get them, fatigued. They're going to have to take some shots early, but weather the storm into that second, third, fourth quarter if they want to have some success in wearing down that Bears defense. But I think it's going to be, they're, like you said, they're nearly identical when you look at the stat line. It's going to be what do they do and how do they respond to some of those punches, I think, that Lenoir-Rhyne gives them, because they're going to score. They're going to move the football. Yeah. And they're going to hit you on defense. How do they respond, and do they just, put it under their belt? And they've been in this situation. Coach has been there before. So I anticipate this to be a much different team than we saw last year from Benedict in competing in this game.
Well, Benedict's better.
Yeah.
They have a quarterback that's played in the Gulf South Conference and Aeneas Dennis, for example. So I think that actually helps experience-wise. A lot of this team did come back from last year, and they've played at an even higher level than they did last year. So, if you're Benedict, I think you have to think about how you felt with Wingate and what happened last year. And the one thing to kind of point out is to not get behind early, because Lenoir-Rhyne, when they kind of sense that you're getting behind, I mean, they really start to apply the pressure to you. So Benedict really can't afford to really get behind, certainly not by 2 touchdowns early.
Yeah, for sure. For Lenoir-Rhyne, Kris, what are, we've seen them, we've seen how explosive they can be, right? If they get out and they're going to get their shots. What do you think, in your opinion, is some of those things that we need to see from Lenoir-Rhyne if they want to advance to the regional finals?
Well, the one thing that I'm really looking forward to is the run game, because the dangerous part about Lenoir-Rhyne is when they are two dimensional. If they are able to really slow down the run game, keep Dwayne McGee balled up, if Benedict's able to do that, then I think it puts a little bit more emphasis on that pass game, and that's where you could start to see maybe a little bit of pressure happening for the quarterbacks at Lenoir-Rhyne. So I'm particularly curious to see if they can remain two dimensional and sort of keep Benedict off balance. If you're looking at the Lenoir-Rhyne defense, the one thing I'm looking at is that again the defensive line for them. Again, when we talk about these two teams are so almost mirror images. I'm looking at somebody like Andre Jefferson to see, what he can do to sort of disrupt what Benedict wants to do as well. Somebody who has 10 sacks on the year. And yeah, when you talk about wearing down offensive lines, can can they wear down Benedict to the point where by the time you get to the second half,
Yeah.
they're ready to close the game out, in third quarter, essentially.
Well, and you're right, Chris. Going back to that offense for the Bears, when you look at that run game, and we all know Dwayne McGee, everybody knows Dwayne McGee, right? Rushed for over 1,200 yards this year. But don't forget about Xavion Turner-Knox and Zaire Dillard, man. Each of those guys rushed for 500 yards, and they've got meaningful carries, I think, in pivotal parts of games this year. They're not afraid to carry the load for the Bears. And so right there is a three-headed monster like you talked about. And then you look out on the perimeter, and you've got Tiari Rogers, you've got DeAndre Lester, Malachi Sumter, Keelan Parsons, right? Like the list goes on and on and on. And like you said, if they can be balanced offensively, they become very dangerous and very, very difficult to stop. And we saw that this week against Shepherd, but then you tie that defense in there and they're nasty up front. They move, they're physical. Like, and everybody knows John Ross May on the watch list and whatnot, but don't forget about James Ussery, Andre Jefferson, like you mentioned, Sedarius Kelly, Rashad Yelding, all those guys on defense, they're hungry and they understand how important it is. They come up with some stops. So I think for Lenoir-Rhyne, Chris, I think they have to be explosive and balanced, like you said, up on offense, and they cannot turn the football over. And then on defense, they have to be solid, and they have to make, in my opinion, Benedict dip a dunk it down the field, not give up the big plays. And Benedict, if they do score, you got to put it behind you and you got to move on, right? Like they have to just put it behind them and just continue going and get to that third and fourth quarter.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to mention too, in terms of intangibles, is what Mike Jacobs brings to the table here. I think
Yeah.
in round one, you saw him line up against a team that he has faced before as a coach in Shepherd, and what he was able to do at Notre Dame College really really shows up in preparing for not just last week but this week's game. So I think that somebody like that with a championship pedigree really going to have this team ready to go on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So, so I think this game right here has an opportunity to be really intriguing. We really, I think we want to see if Benedict takes that next step as a program, and then for Lenoir-Rhyne, are they back to what they used to be, making those deep 2, 3, 4 round deep in the playoff runs? And so I think this is kind of a show me type game for both of these teams.
Yep, agreed.
And then we look at the bottom matchup here between Delta State, Valdosta State. This is a rematch that Delta State was victorious earlier in the season. It's a matchup that I think both teams are completely different right now than they were back then. So to me, what we saw before, particularly, I think both teams have matured. Both teams have grown. But it's going to be a little bit different, and we know how hard it is to beat a team 2 times in one season, Chris. So, what are some things that you're particularly looking forward to seeing out of this matchup?
Well, in the first time these two teams played, the way in which they won and lost the game was different. You know, if you're looking at Delta, Patrick Sheegog didn't really pass for a whole lot in that game, and they really took it to Valdosta on the ground. I mean, they gashed him for over 400 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, we're used to seeing more of passing, and again, we talk about that word balance. We normally see that out of Delta,
Yeah.
and that just did not happen. And I think that just showed you, you know, where Valdosta was at that point in time. Still had a lot of things to work out on defense. If you're Valdosta going into this game, you're probably thinking about turnovers. You know, Sammy Edwards, as spectacular he has been in this game, he threw 3 interceptions and didn't throw a single touchdown pass. I mean, he's going to get his yards, you know, in passing, but you know, yards don't mean anything if you can't get into the end zone. And so, I'm really looking to see, you know, what he does a little bit differently, what the coaches draw up a little bit differently for him, but more importantly, you know, the machine that is Delta State. What do you do to slow them down, especially given the fact that you know, out of these 4 teams, Valdosta is the one that gives up a lot on defense. And I mean, when I say a lot, it's not even close.
Well, and that's the thing too, Chris. Like, you know, one of the things that if you watch these two teams and if you watch them throughout the course of the season, the one big difference I think, and it kind of goes both ways here, is Valdosta. I think their offense has grown a lot, particularly from that first game we saw them. They do a great job of taking what the defenses give them. That corner or that safety sitting high, they check it down low, get the athletes the ball in space. And if they're going to press you and they can blow by you, they're going to throw the ball deep and they're going to stretch the field. They're able to run the football, and I think they've gotten better at it. I don't know that they're where we all want them to be or where they want to be, but I think they've gotten better at it. But the thing that they've done, they've changed some stuff up on defense, particularly from the first time we saw them play Delta. Is they've went to more of a 3-down front. They've gotten some more safety help in the back end. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they stay in that look and think that they can maybe bring some more pressure, bring some different exotic blitzes that Patrick Sheegog may get confused on. And then that back end, you know, are they giving you different looks in the coverage aspect of things? With, you know, are they playing the 3 safety look? Are they giving you a 2 high or 1 high? What does that look like? What are they trying to do? Are they going to have to abandon that 3 high, that 3 safety look and bring more down in the box to slow down that Delta State run that we saw, you know, is so dangerous. So it's really a lot of questions on defense that how do they play this? What differences do they bring to the table for Valdosta? And I think if you're Delta State on this, Chris, I still think that they understand that they played once earlier this year. They know it's a different game, and I think they're approaching it that way, you know. And I think they are approaching it like this is a prove it game to them. This is everybody still doubts us, and nobody really thinks that we're here. And you know, I still think to some degree they are not happy with their number 2 ranking in the region, and they feel like they have something to prove, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other piece of this is that like they're getting to play common opponents. I mean,
Without a doubt.
they already played West Florida. Where's West Florida? Gulf South Conference.
Yeah.
Where's Valdosta? Gulf South Conference. So, you know, there's not a lot of new to this matchup. There's a lot of I mean, it's a pretty big rivalry.
Yep.
And so it's a pretty big test for both teams, but I think it's a bigger test for Valdosta than it is for Delta State in this game.
I agree with you. I think I I think for me the thing I look at in this thing is Delta State. I think for me as I look at this from the outside, if Delta State wants to be who everybody thinks they are and who they think they are, this is a must win for them. For Valdosta State, it's a hey, look, we're still Valdosta State. Yeah, we weren't in the mix last year. We are still Valdosta State. We are still title town. And for me, you know, we've kept asking them to win these games and kind of establish themselves back on that line. And so I think for them that's important in this game to see that. But if you're Delta State, I think for them to win this football game, I think Patrick Shegog has to be able to run the football. He's got to make good decisions in the pass game. And they've got to just pretty much, to me, do what they did last week and when it comes to offense and be multiple, be flexible, and just continue to wear down defenses. On the flip side of that, I think their defense, Valdosta State, like you said, they're going to get their points. They're going to do what they do offensively. You got to put that behind you. You got to create a couple of turnovers and take advantage of the Valdosta State mistakes throughout the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's hard to really argue against that. It's the same thing we said about Benedict. It's the same thing for Valdosta. They, getting behind early could really pose a challenge, especially if you're just going and matching what Delta does after that. I think this really just comes down to defense. Who's going to stop who? Because these are two very, very potent offenses.
For sure. And I think you're right. Like Valdosta State, they have to limit mistakes, particularly in a stage like this. This is a big week. And we'll talk about the week here in a second, but this is a big game for them, and they know that, and they have to pretty much, in my opinion, play almost mistake free if they want to have a chance to win this football game. And it's a different environment. It's not a regular season game. It's not it's not just another Gulf South game. This is a playoff game that you win or you go home. And so I think there's a little bit more pressure there. How do they handle that pressure? But for Valdosta, I think they have to continue doing what they do offensively, and they have to find ways to confuse Patrick Shegog in that offense, get him out of rhythm, get him behind the sticks, and put them in at, second and long, third and long situations and get them to punt. If they can do that, I think they have a chance to win the football game.
Can we just go ahead and call this the official Gulf South Conference Championship game? I mean, because these are co-champs. Like whoever wins it, they get the official title at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's and I think it's frustrating for both sides, and I think particularly for Delta State because they had to play West Florida last week. They're playing Valdosta this week, so there's definitely a little frustration that they don't get to play some other people in different conferences and things like that. But I think they're just going to take it one game at a time and see what happens here. For Valdosta, good win last week, and so this is an exciting opportunity, I think, for both teams to kind of cement that. And I think, Chris, we haven't really talked about this, and I think this is, I do want to hit on this. I think this is important to talk about this week in particular for all four of these teams and the 12 other teams playing in the other super regions. This is a special week to be playing football at any level. The week of Thanksgiving is a special day. And a lot of times as a player, you don't realize how special it really is to be able to practice on Thanksgiving morning. A lot of times you think you're not with your family, you're not getting to go home and do that type of stuff, but you're with your extended family, you're with your football family. And as coaches, we all know how important this week is, and it's special to play at a week like this. But for the players, I would tell you to take this in, because you only get so many opportunities to play on Thanksgiving week. And as you may not realize it now, but as you look back on it and you look back on time with your teammates and things like that, it's just a special week that not everybody gets to do. And so I can't tell you how important a week like this is, and to put those distractions behind you as well when you get to Saturday.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I would also just add to that, getting to round two is such a big feat because it means for all except the top seeds that you've won a playoff game.
Yeah.
And that alone is a pretty big accomplishment, because there's so many teams that they just get there and they just can't get past that hurdle. So, to be here for round two is another big feat in itself. So it's great for recruiting. It's a lot of transfers out there now.
And then, well, with the transfer portal, for sure. So, well, Chris, any parting thoughts here as we kind of wrap up the going in here into week two?
Well, I would say the biggest thing, if you're Benedict, is that the HBCU fans are looking to you to make some noise in this one. So, we were let down. I know we had a little bit of flack last week about us talking about a Super Region 1 game that involved a Super Region 2 team. So I didn't forget about that. But now what we have is, a lone HBCU team that's, got a big hurdle here. It's a pretty tall task to take down Lenoir-Rhyne. Is it possible? Yeah, they already have one loss, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what Benedict can do. And then on the other side of this bracket, I mean, that's just going to be a war zone. I mean,
It really
that
is.
is going to be an absolute battle, and I am here for it. So these are two fantastic games.
Likewise. I'm excited about the week. I think, like you said, I mean, there's just a lot that, to me, round 2 is almost a prove it round of, like you said, it's special to win week 1, but now you want to show everybody you're the real deal. You got to win week 2, and you got to get to that next one, right? It's a regional final, but yeah, so I'm excited about it, Kris. I know a lot of our viewers are, and so it's been a long season to get to this point. Super exciting. So want to thank you, Kris, for hopping on this week and talking Division II football as we start going into the playoffs next week. We'll be back for the regional final preview. But for K-Ferg, I'm Coach Poe. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. And as always, enjoy your football Saturday, and we'll see you next week here on Super Region 2 Playoff Preview.